one thing that was really important from us from day one was the integrity in what we do and the provenance in what we do. And there's many sort of products and brands out there that may have a geographic reference in their name, but actually may have no true real association with that location. And so it was always important to us that we would have a distillery in Salcombe itself. This is a theme we may come back to. It's about focus. And it's a word that gets used so much in our discussions here. So trying to avoid the temptation to be distracted, and really trying to focus on, where's your core opportunity?
Hello, and welcome to Inspired Sounds, Rathbones' exclusive podcast dedicated to supporting and empowering entrepreneurs. In each episode, we dive into the journey of inspirational entrepreneurs and founders who we invite to share the thrills and spills of their own journey. We hope you enjoy listening.
Hello and welcome to Inspired Sounds. I'm Rebecca Tunstall, one of the investment managers at Rathbones, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Howard of Salcombe Gin. Hello, Howard.
Hi, good morning. Good morning.
It's lovely to see you today. And I was actually just saying that I was in your shop this weekend, so very, very beautiful. Howard, tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get started?
Okay, I'll let out right from the early days, if you like. So
Please
I'll try and keep it not too long. I mean, as a child, ever since I'm not originally from Salcombe. I originally grew up in Hampshire, and as a child, from the age of 5, my family, this is where we came every year on holiday, without fail, 2 weeks holiday in the summer to Salcombe. And we would stay down at a place near South Sands Beach, a lovely beach in Salcombe, where we could keep a couple of dinghies on the beach, a couple of boats. And my summers as a child were spent here, sailing around the estuary, going around the rock pools, trying to find crabs and fish and whatever else we could find. And I do not exaggerate, where I just loved it. And I'd look forward to the holiday here hugely. I couldn't sleep the night before we were going to travel down. And then there was a sailing school in Salcombe called the Island Cruising Club. And I did a couple of sailing courses there as a child. And then sort of, by the way, and then in parallel, through our love of Salcombe, my family just moved to Salcombe. We bought a house here and the whole family moved down. So that was fantastic. So I was very fortunate to then be able to live here. And then there was a sailing school, the Island Cruising Club, where I learned to sail as a child. And then when I was a teenager, or late-ish teenager, I started teaching there as a sailing instructor. And we'd be teaching kids to sail on and around Salcombe Estuary. And it was there that I met Angus, now my business partner, some years later. So we'd be teaching kids to sail during the day around Salcombe. And then there was a bit of it's not a regular, but the way it tended to work out was that we'd always go out into town in the evenings, for a few social drinks with our friends. And the first stop would always be Salcombe Yacht Club, where there's a lovely terrace overlooking the estuary. And I kid you not, the first drink of the evening would always be a gin and tonic. And that was my introduction to gin. So from not too young an age, but youngish age, my introduction to gin was enjoying a gin and tonic as a sunset looking over Salcombe Estuary. And as such, Salcombe's always had my family live here anyway, a place in my heart, somewhere that I've loved, my childhood memories, and an association with, good times with friends. Anyway, Angus and I then went and did our own separate careers, went off to university, did some bits and bobs after that, etc. And then after a period of time, had both kind of really got a desire to start a business. And we got talking, and we both had a love of fine spirits, which kind of had been spawned back in Salcombe in the day, and a love of Salcombe. There was a growing interest in people in general in terms of high quality spirits and artisan spirits and distilleries. And so it seemed like such a rich and obvious opportunity. Let's blend, if you excuse the pun, our love of this amazing place, Salcombe, with our love and interest in fine spirits, particularly gin, and start a gin distillery here. And so, cut a long story short, I can take you through a bit more how that all arose in more detail when we started, but that's kind of how it started. It's been good.
And when was that, Howard?
So the the initial time when Gus and I started really talking was in 2014, the summer of 2014. Gus had been out in the States for a while and seeing the craft distillation movement take off there. He's like, I've got this, I've got this idea. And so we were talking about it. And then really the next 18 months to 2 years was about setting up the business. So firstly, we had to learn how to distill. We'd not got experience making it ourselves. Actually, Gus had done one little course up at Springbank in Scotland for whiskey. So we then spent some time ourselves working in another distillery in Scotland, and also doing a lot of training. We bought a miniature still and started iterating on our gin recipe to create our maiden Salcombe Gin, which is called Start Point. And that took about 18 months. In parallel with that, we needed to raise some investment to start the business. We thought we were going to need around £500,000. So we started going back trying to raise that investment. I could talk a bit about that if you're interested. And then we needed a site for the distillery as well. And one thing that was really important from us from day one was the integrity in what we do and the provenance in what we do. And there's many sort of products and brands out there that may have a geographic reference in their name, but actually may have no true real association with that location. And so it was always important to us that we would have a distillery in Salcombe itself. And so we were scratching around trying to find a suitable location for a distillery here in Salcombe. And there's not a great deal of commercial property here in Salcombe.
I mean, it's not a huge space, is it?
It's not. It's a small town. And then on the grapevine, we heard that so the Island Cruising Club, where we used to work, was actually based on a disused ferry moored in the estuary. But they also had a land base as well, sort of a boat store where they would do boat maintenance. And that's on a street called Island Street. And we heard on the grapevine, because the Island Cruising Club at this point was kind of, frankly, sort of dying out as a business, to be honest. It sort of seen its day, unfortunately. And so we understood that this site was being developed. We thought, well, that feels like fate. This building that was owned by where we met years ago, now being developed. And so we found out who the landlord was, who owned it, found out what was planned, managed to download from the internet, from the council planning website, the initial sort of architect's diagrams of what they were planning on doing with the building. So we literally downloaded those. Then on the net, found a nice picture of a big copper still, which you used to make gin, sort of photoshopped that into what was the front window on this architect's diagram of this building. And then, put together literally like a 5-page slide presentation. Arranged a meeting, turned up at the developer's house and said, look, this is what we want to do with your building. How about we turn it into a gin distillery? Wouldn't that be cool? And he was, thankfully, didn't think we were completely nuts and was very supportive. Came on board from an early stage, said, look, once you guys have raised the funding, I'll sort of secure the building for you guys to become the tenants of. So that piece then fell into place. And so then sort of 18 months to 2 years passed. We started getting some amazing feedback on our gin that was prototype at that time. And so then we eventually we launched and started sales in June 2016. And within 6 months, the gin had won gold at the World Gin Awards and things started taking off quite rapidly. It was good.
That's amazing. You're very structured in your growth strategy. Would you talk us a little bit about how you've tackled growth as a business and anything that you've learned along the way? Because I know there will have been some successes and some things that didn't work quite so well.
I'm quite flattered to hear that from the outside it feels very structured. That's because we always have had a plan and a structure. It's always felt very busy internally, and I always sort of draw the analogy to a swan. I'd like to think we do our best to try to look like a swan on the outside. Inside, we're working hard and we're trying to pivot and be dynamic in what we do.
Paddling fast.
But what I'm certainly, firstly, from the outset, we had a very clear values and very clear objective in terms of what we wanted to achieve. So for values, I'm always a bit embarrassed because it sounds such a cliche, but I'll say it anyway, because actually I think it was important. So we started, what are the key values of our business going to be? There was 3 things. One was a passion for what we do. We Gus and I, we love gin. We love the spirits industry. We love the whole interest in developing gins in the process, and in fact, the enjoyment and social aspect of it. So we're passionate about what we do, and we really wanted everybody who works with us to feel the same way. So passion was one. Another, which I sort of touched on already, was integrity. There's got to be integrity and truth in everything that we did, be that from the location of our distillery to the truth in how we distill our gin, how we communicate, how we make our gin, what we do, even down to boring stuff in terms of the accounting and HMRC reporting. We've got to be on it and honest. So that's been another kind of key value. And then thirdly, an uncompromising approach to quality and attention to detail. So we set out from day one to create an extremely high quality spirit and products and everything that goes with that. So then you've got the packaging, you've got the marketing, you've got the consumer experience that you've had briefly in our shop recently. Everything's got to be perfect and beautiful. And that's a hard bar, by the way, that can actually cause problems as well. So there are those sort of three values, which I think stood us in good stead. And then a very clear objective as well. And the objective, and I'll do you a slightly different phrasing, but fundamentally, and still our objective, is to be the world's #1 luxury gin. I'd like to be able to go to, most places in the world, go to some cool bar in some far-flung exotic location, walk into this bar and order myself a Salcombe Gin, start, point and tonic. Yeah, that is it. So be sort of, internationally recognized as a superb, absolute top of, world-class, top-scale gin. And then also then potentially in the future, it may be that one day it could be that a big strategic acquirer decides to pick up the business, in which case there's some considerations there to make sure that, if you like, the legacy and integrity of the business is not compromised, if that were to occur. But it's always been sort of setting up in mind what type of business would have the capability to become a world-renowned brand and also potentially look very attractive for an acquirer in the future. And so there are still some clear volume targets, and also, should we say, a real focus, actually more so than volume, is actually taken a second seat in many ways, has been what we call brand equity. Really building value into everything about our product and that goes with it. That's been a very important focus from day one, and that's driven a lot of our strategic growth decisions. So there's times we could have just gone purely for volume and just blown it out everywhere, let anybody stock it and have loads of discounting and cut corners on quality. But you hit these decisions every single day on that journey. But we've always been very, very considered, okay, where's the right place for Salcombe Gin to be stocked? Where should we be investing our time, both and money and resources in trying to focus to grow the business, to try to support those key objectives.
Actually, having done a few of these podcasts, there are very similar things that come out from successful businesses, that clear vision and always coming back to your vision, and that cultural piece. It is something that resonates throughout all of these podcasts. Howard, you are very clear about the fact that you brought in professional advisors right from the beginning in order to create that strategy and to grow your business. Do you think that, for other people who are on a similar journey to you, do you think that's been a key to the success of Salcombe Gin?
Yeah, I just sort of caveat a little bit. I mean, obviously when we're starting out, or even now, you never necessarily got loads of spare money sloshing around to invest huge amount. It's about trying to get a right level of proportional investment to where you are. And when we began, whilst we had raised some investment to start the business, that didn't leave us with massive amounts of money. So you've got to be considered in what you do. But absolutely what we did was, beg, borrow and steal as much as we could in the early days. So we were very fortunate in that, actually, Angus had an old school friend, a guy called Nick Marshall, and he'd worked for Bacardi for like 17 years. Well, various brands. He'd worked for Moet Hennessy, and he'd been he was like, global ambassador for Grey Goose vodka at some point, and so he had this huge experience in particularly in sort of, should we say, premium spirits brands and what you do on an international scale to grow this to an international scale. So he came on the board very early on and was a really useful, gave us some really good advice, and he's still with us now. So that was key. And then subsequently, we've had our current chair is our chairman is somebody called Nick Blasquez. We seem to like people called Nick in the business. And Nick was basically has years and years of experience with Diageo. And in fact, he was basically pretty much number 2 at Diageo. So, colossal level of experience, very broad range of skills. And so he's been, instrumental in giving us a lot of fantastic advice as well. So rather roundabout way of answering your question, but yeah, I think there's a lot you can learn and make some appropriate decisions by just working hard, getting your head out there, learning you can as much from other people in the industry, but also trying to get 1 or 2 key people who've actually been there, done it to some extent, and really have sort of seen outside of the box is really important as well. So yeah, it is key.
Your brand has obviously evolved over time, and you've diversified. So as we've said before, you obviously have the shop and a bar in Salcombe, but you've also diversified your offering. Could you talk us through the evolution?
Yeah, and I think there's been some pros and cons here, actually. So we started off with a primary focus on gin. But always sort of held in our mind that we may launch some other spirits or drinks as well. And focusing on the gin, we have expanded the range. So we started off with our original maiden gin Start Point. And it's always a temptation when you're, I think, in a business doing something that you love to just start creating thousands of products, because product development is fun.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. And launching products is fun, but also product development, and in particular, launching products is a massive drain on resources, and it can really distract you. But nonetheless, there's times when it's the right thing to do. So as gin started really exploding here in the UK, there also was an increased interest in some sort of colour gins and flavour gins and this sort of thing. Now, actually, to be honest, we were and still are somewhat sceptical in terms of we're a bit purists, so we like real proper gin. But there was this interest, and we didn't really want to follow it too much because we thought it would probably come in and go out. And in fact, that is what we're seeing right now. But nonetheless, sort of to tip our hat to, we thought, well, maybe there's something here that we can do that's a bit more, sounds pretentious now, sophisticated. Which, by the way, is a bit of a theme. Often we'll look at something and think, how can we take this and actually do something a little bit better or raise it, raise the bar on it. And so actually we launched a gin called Rosé Sainte Marie, which is inspired by a rosé wine from Provence. And the idea was you kind of take this idea of, rosé wine is sort of wine, it still tastes like wine, but you get subtle notes of fruit flavors coming through that. And so we thought, let's try to recreate something similar in a gin. So we created Rosé Sainte Marie, which is, I try not to call it a pink gin. It's got a light sort of rose pink blush to it.
Howard, when I bought it, I called it a pink gin, I'm afraid.
That most people do, and that's something we just have to accept. It's okay, So we launched that in 2019, and it's fantastic, and that did very well. So we sort of saw this opportunity, and then launched a product, albeit slightly different to a lot of what was out there in the market at the time. And then we have expanded with a couple of other gins since then, and then also, in the background, we've always quite liked rum, and we've got quite a nautical theme to the business. In that, the whole business, the distilleries here is right by the water. My background is sailing and water sports of every possible description, and so rum's got a nice association there as well. So we also launched a rum shortly afterwards, albeit that remains a rather small part of the business, simply because we've been focusing more on the gin. And then the third sort of facet in terms of sort of product diversification is, as you may recall, around sort of 2020-ish, again, there's been this growing interest in changing our society and culture, really, around health and well-being, such that there's been a lot more interest in non-alcoholic or low-alcoholic drinks. And again, there was an opportunity here. What was interesting was, with beer, there started being a huge amount of non-alcoholic beers on the market. And I actually think many of them are very good. And there's some fantastic beers. And you compare it, actually, I'm not going to name any brands, but compare it to sort of the single non-alcoholic beer that existed about 20 years ago. It's come a long way, and there's some amazing non-alc beers. And then these sort of non-alcoholic spirits started arising as well. And I take my hat off to one or two of the brands that were sort of the early forerunners of this. But at the same time, we didn't, how can I say this? We didn't think the quality was that high at the time. There was but it's difficult, by the way, making a good non-alcoholic spirit. And so there was a sort of growing market opportunity. We thought there was the capability to improve on the quality of product that was already out there. And to be honest as well, actually, there was even a personal thing. Like both Angus and myself, I find myself, sometimes during weekdays, I wouldn't necessarily want an alcoholic drink. I do quite a bit of sport. I work quite hard. I want to be sharp. So sometimes I would just want a non-alcoholic drink during the week. And so, and actually, and Angus's wife, they recently had their second child, and so, while she was pregnant, she wasn't drinking. So there's things like this. So actually, maybe we should do something here. So we launched a non-alcoholic family of spirits called New London Light. And we launched the first one, I think, in 2020, and then a couple of other products in that range. One called Aegean Sky and another called Midnight Sun, about 18 months to 2 years later. And so that then now forms, if you like, the three kind of core products that we have: gin, rum, which is relatively small with us, and New London Light, our non-alcoholic spirit. But it's worth saying that our primary focus is still really around gin. And we can get into it later if you want to, Rebecca, but there's big questions that we still ask ourselves now and would in future, and looking back in the past, of when is it right to diversify? When are you just trying to spread yourself too thin? And then how much going forward? Where do you invest your time and money? And that is always difficult.
Yeah, which I think leads me on to my next question in terms of your overall strategy, in terms of how do you grow yourselves as a business? And I know we've spoken about this briefly before, but, do you focus on, direct to consumer? Are you more, focused on the supermarkets or internationally? And how do you and Gus as founders work out that strategy?
Okay.
Big question.
I'm just conscious that I'm giving you like really verbose answers here. So I hope there's no sort of short answer for these things. So firstly, as a business, we actually, more so than a few others, we're very multi-channel. So the direct to consumer side of our business is hugely important through the shops that we have, one in Salcombe, one in Dartmouth, through the website and some events and things. We also will sell direct to trade establishments such as bars, restaurants, retailers, and often then there'll be an intermediary like a wholesaler or distributor as an in-between that helps with that broader distribution. And we do some export as well. We export to North America, a couple of countries in Europe, some to the Middle East, and some to Southeast Asia as well. So we are covering all channels, which does lead to constant strategic discussions of where should we be focusing. And I would say, there's certainly been at least one time in the past where I think, we've, in our desire and excitement, you try to expand too quickly and you invest too much. You can invest too much time and money in a new market before you've really fully realized all the opportunity in a market closer to home. So right now, don't get me wrong, we are still supporting those export markets, and we've still got a couple of interesting growth opportunities there as well. But we're trying to make sure that the majority of our focus is on the domestic UK market at the moment, albeit a huge growth area for us right now is travel retail. So the duty-free shops that you see in airports and on ferries and things, that's been really exciting. Supermarkets is interesting that you mentioned. So we have some listings at some supermarkets. Typically not national, typically a bit regional, but it's a very challenging and competitive environment. As you can imagine, firstly, supermarkets' internal targets in terms of their profitability and rate of sale that they require from any product is demanding, particularly if you're not already a huge, massive brand. So margins will tend to be slim. And the other challenge as well with supermarkets is that, again, without wanting to sound strong about it. We're relatively, we're quite a high value product. So we're sort of towards the upper, our start point in Rosé Saint Marie gins, our typical retail price is £45 for those products. And normally in the supermarkets, that spending environment, people are typically often trying to spend less than that when they're looking to buy a drink. So it can be quite hard to find a supermarket that's a fit and where the typical customer base is going to be motivated to buy sort of such a high quality product. So that often lends itself as to, okay, what would be the right fit, and then how much would we invest in that supermarket to try to help support the sale of those products? And if you're not careful, very easily you'll find yourself just making a loss on that. Now, you could justify that to yourself by saying, okay, yeah, well, look, we're making a loss, but hey, that's putting our product in 300 stores around the country. It's great visibility, it's marketing. And sometimes that may be right, but it's also a slippery slope, because you can easily start trying to justify all kinds of like great loss-making initiatives just to put your products in front of people. And fundamentally, you've got to pay the wages. You've got to be selling the product somewhere that's going to make some profit. So it's in short, it's a constant strategic consideration. But in summary, at the moment, we're very much focusing on we're slightly more focusing on the domestic market here in the UK. Travel retail is huge for us, and we're supporting, if you like, select national stockists, as well as trying to very much support our direct to consumer channel as well, which is hugely important.
And looking back, what would you say? Because I think we learn a lot from our mistakes as well as our successes. So what is the biggest sort of mistake or learning moment that you and Gus have had during the course of the business? And I'm sure there's been many, but maybe just one that resonates with you.
I think I kind of touched on it earlier, actually, to be honest. I think it was the distraction of trying to we just started expanding internationally quite quickly in a few areas, and we were seeing success there. But it was kind of, it meant we weren't focusing enough on the UK domestic market, and there's still huge opportunity for us to grow here. We're still actually a relatively small company, smaller than some people think. And so I say, so in terms of the key learning for me, it was really, this is a theme we may come back to. It's about focus. And it's a word that gets used so much in our discussions here. So trying to avoid the temptation to be distracted, and really trying to focus on, where's your core opportunity? What's really going to be delivering the value the most in this immediate short term, and not just being swayed by emotion, ego, fun, desire. I mean, there needs to be a bit of that, okay?
Yeah.
But you've got to be careful it doesn't end up biasing the decisions you make as a company.
So what does the next 5 years look like for Salcombe Gin?
Well, hopefully lots of fun. As many excuses as possible to do things, cool partnerships, and associate ourselves with. As you know, we've got a great partnership at the moment with the Marine Conservation Society, also with the RLLI, and also lots of other nice sailing and regattas and coastal events that we love. But on a more, on a more serious note, within the next 5 years, I'd expect to quadruple the size of the company. We've still got a great deal of growth here in the UK that we intend to achieve, and particularly, building stronger distribution around the country, and the travel retail side has got huge growth, and then we will start investing further in some of our overseas export as well, where we've got a couple of nice growing opportunities. So yeah, I'd expect to quadruple our sales. I don't expect to diversify more in terms of launching more products, at least other spirits products. There's lots of temptations there, but I'm sure there'll be one or two more gins on the horizon, and really trying to focus and build international awareness of our product range.
Howard, thank you ever so much for joining us today. This has been Inspired Sounds. Thank you for listening.
thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed listening and watching. To tune in and meet our next exciting guest in the Inspired Sound series, press the follow and subscribe button. Goodbye.